This Sikha is a Siyum HaMasechta Eruvin. It's also connected, of course, with a pasuk in this week's Parsha, which deals with Tchum Shabbos, which from where we learn out the concept of Tchum Shabbos, which is one of the halachas that we're going to be discussing in the Sikha. Because it's a very, very long Sikha with lots of details, we're going to try to summarize some of the main akudas and sort of the general flow of the Sikha. So what the Rebbe is dealing with in this Sikha is a Mishnah at the very, very end of Masechta Eruvin, where Reb Shimon says the following statement. He says, "Makom she'itiru l'cha chachamim," the place where the chachamim have allowed you to do something, mishalcha nosnu l'cha, it's what they gave you is that which is yours. Shalo'itiru l'cha ela mishum shvus, because all what they allowed to do, let you do, was something that was anyways only asur midirabanan. What's this referring to? What this is referring to is two different halachas and earlier mishnahs in the Masechta. The first one is dealing with the halacha that Reb Shimon is of the opinion that if a person started off Shabbos outside the marker of the Tchum Shabbos we usually know is 2,000 amos outside the city, Reb Shimon is of the opinion if you're 15 amos past the marker, you could actually go inside. Why is that? He's explaining over here in this Mishnah. Because what the Chachamim are allowing you to go in, those 15 amos really belong to you anyways. Why? Because when the marker was put there was some leeway put into the system. It wasn't put at the very edge of the 2,000 amos. It was really put a little bit inwards. So therefore, you started off Shabbos outside, you could go in as long as you're within those 15 amos within that marker. What's the second statement that he's saying? Shalo'itiru l'cha ela mishum shvus is dealing with another case. And that is, there's a machloikas that if in the Beis HaMikdash the string on one of the instruments broke, one opinion says you're allowed to make a knot on Shabbos, Reb Shimon says you can only make a bow. And here he's giving his logic that the Chachamim only allow you to do something that's going to be related to an Isur Midrabanan, so they are the ones that they can allow you to do it, but not something that could be a Doiraisa. The question, of course, is what's the connection between these two halachas? They seem to be two very, very not related halachas. So without getting into all the details, the back and forth, the Rebbe explains it in a very, very fascinating way. And what the Rebbe is saying is the following, that what we're dealing with over here is a case of quality versus quantity. How does this work? So what Reb Shimon is saying is, why am I telling you in the case of Tchum Shabbos that you should rather go into the Tchum Shabbos and not stay outside? And the Rebbe learns Pshat that not only he's allowing you to go in, but he's saying that it's the ideal thing, you should go back in if you can. It's within those 15 amos. Says the Rebbe, because what Rab Shimon is saying is, if you stay outside the Tchum Shabbos, you're going to be missing out on Einig Shabbos. You're going to be missing out on the Einig Shabbos, which is a mitzvah. You're supposed to have Einig Shabbos. You can't enjoy yourself properly when you're stuck outside the city. So that's on the one hand. Now this is going to be going on for the next 24 hours. On the other hand, crossing into that border, that questionable gray area of the border, that's only going to be one moment. So therefore, it's a question of quality. It's a stronger Isser going possibly over that border. But on the other hand, you have the quantity of the 24 hours of Shabbos. So Reb Shimon says, rather go into this questionable area. On this, Reb Shimon says, based on this logic, which one should have I told you is better to do? Make a knot or make a bow? Seemingly, I should have then told you to make a knot. Why? Because the knot, although it's a stricter Isur, nevertheless, it's only going to be one moment. I'm going to make the knot and I don't have to redo it. Whereas if I make a bow, I might have to redo it many, many times. So seemingly, I should have said over here, better make the knot. Like I told you over there, just cross the border. So Reb Shimon says, no, the only reason I allowed it to you over there is because it was lechatchila within your space, you were allowed to go in. But over here, we can't compare it because it's a totally different kind of Isser. One is doiraisa and one is midrabanan. When we're comparing quality and quantity, they both have to be in the same category. But since the knot is going to be a Isser doiraisa and the bow, the most will end up as a Isser drabanan, that's why I'm not allowing it to you over here. Now, another thing that Rebbe deals with is, how is this connected to something earlier that says in this same Mishnah? And that is, that there's an argument going on if a dead sheretz was found in the Beis HaMikdash. How do you take it out? One opinion is the kohen grabs with one of his garments, he grabs the sheretz and takes it out. Another opinion is, no, you have to go looking for a wooden tongues, which won't be makabel tumah, and that's the way you'll take it out. Says the Rebbe, it's exactly the same argument. Quality versus quantity. Am I worried that there's the sheretz is going to be in the Beis HaMikdash, I want to get it out right away? Now, on the one hand, so here I'm worried about the timing. In other words, I just want to get it out right away. That's what my concern is. Should be less time in the Beis HaMikdash. On the other hand, there's a way of looking at it. No, but there's going to be more isur right now. If I take it out with my garment, I'm going to be adding tumah, because the garment is also going to become tummy now. Maybe I should rather keep it there longer and take it out with a wooden tongs, as long as I'm not adding in the tumah. So this is the general nigla part of the Sikha, the way the Rebbe explains it. The Rebbe now goes into Pnimi Yisrael to explain it in another way, from which we're going to have another understanding of what's the benefit of going into that Tchum Shabbos, so to speak. In order to explain this, and also to connect the two different dinim of the Tchum Shabbos and the Isur Drabonon, of the tying, the knot, and so on. So in order to explain this, the Rebbe looks at something else. And the Rebbe looks at the idea, a famous medrash that tells us that a certain heretic asked Rabbi Akiva, if Hashem keeps Shabbos, Hashem shouldn't be making grass grow on Shabbos and rain come on Shabbos and so on and so forth. And he answered that for the Eibishter, the whole world is his private domain. And the question, of course, is how does that help? We're not only speaking about carrying on Shabbos, we're speaking about the idea of other malachos. So we must say that somehow carrying on Shabbos really encapsulates the whole idea of all the malachos of Shabbos. And if there's no issue of carrying on Shabbos, for what, as we'll soon explain, then automatically all the other malachos fall away as well. How does this apply by Hashem? What's the idea of Shabbos? Shabbos is to remind us the idea that Hashem is the one and only, that Hashem is the one that creates the world, that the only reality is Elikus, and so on and so forth. That means even though the world seems to be a place where there is duality and a world where there is other inyanim, but Shabbos reminds us the idea that the only reality is only Elikus, is only Hashem. So in other words, when a person Chas v'sholem does a malacha on Shabbos, this is weakening that emunah. Chas v'sholem bringing in more klipa into the world, more concealment into the world. This is what Rabbi Akiva was saying. Since from Hashem's perspective, of course, it's not possible to be any sort of concealment, any sort of thing that takes away from the elikus of the world. So the main malacha of Shabbos, going out from the Rishus HaYochid, carrying from the private domain to the public domain, doesn't exist, because the whole world is one private domain. It's all Hashem's domain. So therefore, automatically, any other negative things are also not shaykh on the inyan of Shabbos, because again, they all just branch out from the one main nekuda, that there's a Rishus HaYochid, that Hashem is the one and only boss. So the Rebbe goes on to explain. We know that generally all the things in the world are in three categories, similar to the three domains of Shabbos. You have the inyanim of mitzvah, of kedusha, which is like the idea of a Rishus HaYochid, the area where we're involved in asay toivin, positivity, acting in a positive way. There is the inyan of the Rishus HaRabim, the area of the many, which is the inyan of klipos. Here is the sur meirah, staying away from the bad. And then there is the middle area, which is between the Rishus HaYochid and the Rishus HaRabim. These are places like a courtyard, which has a number of houses, or an alleyway, and so on and so forth. And here we are told that there's an idea of making an Erev, which is a mitzvah. It's a good idea to make an Erev in these kind of Eruvim. And the Rebbe says, what's the idea over here? In other words, we're trying to make from a place which possibly looks like outside the Rishus HaYochid, we want to make it a Rishus HaYochid for Hashem. And this is also the idea of an Erev Tchumen. We're trying to make a place which is not only the place of the city, but try to extend and make the city go further, the Rishus HaYochid of Hashem, to be able to go further. Says the Rebbe, here we could see the connection between the 2 points that Reb Shimon was speaking about. On the one hand, the idea of the Erev Tchumen. On the other hand, all these other shvusim, the malachos, in the case of the tying of the knot of the kinor, which again all really come down to the one general malacha of hitzah, which we said really embodies all of the malachos of Shabbos. From here, the Rebbe says the truth of the matter is a big difference between the idea of going out of the tchum and the malacha of Shabbos. In fact, they're opposites of each other. The idea of an Isur Malacha on Shabbos is not to bring in a klipa into Shabbos. You don't want to bring the negativity, the malacha, and all of that into Shabbos. When it comes to the idea of Tchum Shabbos, it seems to be the other way around. Maybe I'm trying to extend the place of Shabbos, the place of the city, to the outside. But of course, we're told we're not allowed to do that. And therefore, what the Rebbe is telling us is, once we understand the idea of Tchum Shabbos is, no, you can't just go outside the domain of Kedusha. So we'll now understand what Rab Shimon is saying is, if there's a possibility to get back in right away. Because every moment you're staying outside of that, that's staying in the domain of Klippa. And the Rebbe now goes with a very, very powerful Eirah to explain what this all means in Avodas Hashem. The Rebbe says, of course, we know that the main idea of a Yid is his Nefesh Alikis. And his Nefesh Alikis, like Hashem, is completely removed from the world. And the whole idea of getting involved in the world and work is a tzimtzum, is a yerida, is a descent for him. And therefore, when the person is involved in all of these worldly things throughout the week, we have to always remember that in essence the Yid is Shabbos. And he has to remember these two ideas, the Isur Malacha and going out of the Tchum Shabbos. What would this mean in Avodas Hashem? So the Isur Malacha of Shabbos means Shabbos is the place, the person's holiest places, the person's highest koiches and faculties, his seichel and so on. He always must remember that that needs to be completely designated for Hashem, and he doesn't use his deepest koiches of his feelings and his seichel for inyanim of mundane things. He only involves his lower koiches there. So he doesn't bring in malacha, he doesn't bring the mundane things into his holiest place of his faculties. The idea of not going out to Tchum Shabbos is the idea that when you are involved in Shabbos, Dikinyanim, you're involved in Torah, Tefillah, mitzvahs, and so on, make sure that every part of you is there and don't allow your legs, don't allow your feet to walk out and to be involved in other things outside of the domain of Kedusha. And finally, the Rebbe finishes over the Eirah of that sheretz that's found in the Beis HaMikdash. Sometimes we find that it's a tumah, not even part of ourselves. We were doing the right things, and sometimes there's some external forces that are trying to cause us a tumah. So the Rebbe says here there's two ways of doing it. One way is, as the Mishnah says, you deal with your own garments, take it out, that means you get involved with it. But as the Rebbe says in Tanya, you deal with a dirty person, you get dirty yourself. So that could be a problem. And then there's another avodah that, as the Alter Rebbe puts it in Tanya, you don't deal with it right now. You may make special times to deal with it, but you don't want to get involved in the negativity. You don't want to get involved in things. You just ignore it completely because you don't want to add tumah. And therefore, you delay it for the meantime. Either way, the Rebbe says, definitely now we're holding already close to Bias HaMashiach, and now it's definitely the schus and the chayva for each and every one of us to get rid of the ruach hatumah and ha'aretz by spreading chassidus to the outside and to bring Mashiach immediately now.